Chapter 21, Section 1. And you can see you have your terms. Write a complete definition for each term. Be sure to number your terms. Okay? And then you have major events. This is for Mr. Lane, so I'm not 100% sure if it's the same for Tank and Rempel. But for Mr. Lane, you need to write a maximum of 30 to 35 words for each major event listed below. Okay? And it says 1, cause, 2, info, 3, importance of event. Okay, so you have your terms: Jim Crow laws, Soul Force, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SNCC, sit-ins, IDs, Thurgood Marshall, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr. Excuse me. So let's look at the first question here. We have, what did the Supreme Court rule in Plessy versus Ferguson? Okay, so give me 1 second. I'm in the wrong textbook. During the 1890s, a number of other court decisions and state laws severely limited African American rights. In 1890, Louisiana passed a law requiring railroads to provide equal but separate accommodations for the white and colored races. In the Plessy versus Ferguson case of 1896, the Supreme Court ruled that this separate but equal law did not violate the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed all Americans equal treatment under the law. Okay, so number 2, what did Chief Justice Earl Warren write in Brown versus Board of Education? Hold on, guys. I'm almost there. I'm still getting to my chapter 21. You can hear my dog barking in the background there. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Bottom of the page. Brown versus Board of Education. So Marshall's most stunning victory came on May 17, 1954, in the case known as Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. In this case, the father of an 8-year-old Linda Brown had charged the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, with violating Linda's rights by denying her admission to an all-white elementary school 4 blocks from her house. The nearest all-black elementary school was 21 blocks away. In a landmark verdict, the Supreme Court unanimously struck down segregation in schooling as an unconstitutional violation of the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. So basically, it's saying that separate but equal is not okay. Okay, so they had to allow the African American student to go to the all-white school. So basically, there would be no all-white schools anymore. Schools would be integrated. Okay, so there would be no separate. So that's the importance. Describe the crisis in Little Rock. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Describe the crisis in Little Rock. Why was this such a big deal? Who had to be called in to keep the peace? So in 1948, Arkansas had become the first southern state to admit African Americans to state universities without being required by a court order. By the 50s, some scout troops and labor unions in Arkansas had quietly ended their Jim Crow practices. So the Jim Crow stuff was kind of racist, this kind of stuff. Little Rock citizen had elected 2 men to the school board, okay, to be involved in getting rid of segregation, okay? So there was this one guy, Governor Orville Fabus, who was against African American kids coming to their school at Little Rock Central High School. So, but he was ordered to let the kids come to school. The NAACP members called 8 of the students and arranged to drive them to school, but one of the students didn't have a telephone. So she ended up going to school by herself, which she ended up facing a bunch of angry racist kids who didn't want her to go to school there. So this crisis in Little Rock forced Eisenhower to act. So it asks you, so to describe the crisis. Okay, so why was this such a big deal? Okay, so it was a big deal because these African American students were trying to go to an all-white school, and who had to be called in to keep the peace? So the National Guard had to be called in, okay, to keep the peace. And you can read that top paragraph there talks about that, okay? Okay, 4, describe the actions of Rosa Parks. What did her actions result in? Who led them? Okay, so Rosa Parks was a seamstress and an NAACP officer who was took a seat in the front row of a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. And back in the day, they were supposed to sit in the back of the bus. It wasn't law, but it was just kind of unwritten law that they were supposed to do that. So as Parks stared out the window, the bus driver said, "If you don't stand up, I'm going to call the police and have you arrested." And she said, "You may do that." News of Parks' arrest spread rapidly. Joanne Robinson and NAACP leader Nixon suggested a bus boycott. So the leaders of the African American community and Martin Luther King led a bus boycott. Okay, so this led the Montgomery Bus Boycott proved to the world that the African American community could unite and organize a successful protest movement. It also proved the power of nonviolent resistance, the peaceful refusal to obey unjust laws. Despite threats to his life and family, King urged his followers, "Don't ever let anyone pull you so low as to hate them." Okay, so number 5, who was the founder and president of the SCLC? What was the purpose of it? Okay, so that's actually, okay, yeah. Okay, so after the bus boycott ended, let's see, am I on the wrong page? Actually, this page, you should be on page 7. It starts on 705 and ends on 706. I'm on, let's see. Yeah, I'm on 706 now. Okay. So King joined with minister and civil rights leader in 1957 to found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Its purpose was to carry on nonviolent crusades against the evils of second-class citizenship. Using African American churches as a base, the SCLC planned to stage protests and demonstrations throughout the South. The leadership hoped to build a movement from the grassroots up and to win the support of ordinary African Americans of all ages. King, president of the SCLC, used the power of his voice and ideas to fuel the movement's momentum. Okay, so that answers who was the president and what was the purpose. Okay, so number 6, further down on the page, what is a sit-in and what was the goal? So sit-ins, in this case, in which African American protesters sat down at segregated lunch counters and refused to leave until they were served. So sit-ins can happen anytime that people sit down and they refuse to leave because they're trying to make a point. Okay, so it's a nonviolent way of protesting. So let's see. So the goal in this case was to have, you know how they might have white-only restaurants? So they did, and so they were doing a sit-in to see, to get rid of that. So there wouldn't be segregation or discrimination. So they dealt with, it said, there was no denying the ugly face of racism. Day after day, news reporters captured the scenes of whites beating, jeering at, and pouring food over students who refused to strike back. The coverage sparked many other sit-ins across the South. By late 1960s, students had descended on and desegregated lunch counters in some 48 cities in 11 states. So they were successful because they were able to show the American population that not allowing people of color to eat in a white restaurant was wrong. Okay. Number 7 says, briefly describe the Montgomery Bus Boycott. What was it? What was its outcome? Okay, so we read about that. Okay, so we know that Rosa Parks started the boycott, and it was because she wouldn't sit in the back of the bus. So Rosa Parks gets arrested, and so they decide, you know what, we're not even going to ride the bus. Everybody is not going to ride it. So boycott means you're not gonna do it. Okay, so this boycott proved to the world that the African American community could unite and organize a successful protest movement. You're going to find it on page 704 and 705, okay? And number 8, in your own words, what does separate but equal mean? What court case overturned this idea? So separate but equal just means that we're going to keep these people over here and these people over there. We're saying that we're going to give them the same thing, okay, which they truly didn't. The African Americans did not have schools that were as good as the white kids. But anyway, the law is based on separate but equal, okay? And it applies in civil rights to bathrooms, water faucets, education, and so on, okay? So, and so what was our court case? It was Brown versus Board of Education, okay? Well, let's look at, and so Plessy versus Ferguson. Okay, so Plessy versus Ferguson's not it. That was the one that said separate was equal was okay. And then Brown versus Board of Education was the one that said, you know, it's not okay. So number 8, you're going to put Brown versus Board of Education, and then kind of describe what separate but equal means. Okay, so this is it. You got to do your vocabulary. Okay, it's in bold, so that's not too hard. And then if you have Mr. Lane, you're going to need to do the major events. Okay, I'll see you guys soon. You have any questions, let me know. Bye.